My adopted daughter, Phoebe Marsh, possessed an evil ability. Whenever she got hurt, the pain would also be inflicted directly on my biological daughter, Maisie Shaw. She deliberately hurt herself, covering her body with wounds and bruises. Then, she would turn around with cold eyes, watching Maisie writhe on the floor in agony until she passed out from the pain. With no medical solution available, I broke down and held Maisie close, begging my husband, Brandon Shaw, to send Phoebe away. However, he would erupt in fury. It's obviously Maisie who's been faking illness for attention, and you're making up this ridiculous story to get rid of Phoebe. She's just a fragile, helpless child. How can you be so vicious? After that, Phoebe escalated her self-harm even more viciously. Meanwhile, Maisie spent every day curled up in the corner of her bed, refusing to let anyone touch her. On Maisie's birthday, Phoebe threw herself from the 5th floor. Just as Maisie was blowing out her candles and making a wish, she suddenly began bleeding from all her facial orifices, and she died instantly. Yet, Phoebe only suffered minor scrapes. I died from overwhelming grief shortly after. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to Phoebe's first day in our home. Maisie was playing with her Legos when she suddenly clutched her ankle and started crying. This time, I grabbed the broom from behind the door and swung it toward Maisie, shouting, "I'll beat you up for faking illness and seeking attention." Chapter 1. Phoebe Marsh, our adopted daughter, stood by the entryway and banged her ankle against the sharp corner of the shoe cabinet. Then, my daughter, Maisie Shaw, clutched her ankle and collapsed to the floor, crying her heart out. It was the same scene, the same reaction. She had been sitting obediently on her stool, playing with the Legos in front of her. When Phoebe got hurt, it was Maisie who showed the pain. The next second, Phoebe acted as if she felt nothing and continued slamming her ankle against the sharp corner until it was covered in bruises. Seeing Maisie crying loudly, my husband, Brandon Shaw, frowned and scolded her. "Maisie, this is Phoebe's first day in our home, so don't throw tantrums." When he turned and saw the bruises on Phoebe's foot, he gasped and gently carried her to the couch. He said tenderly, "This is your home now, so take some time to get familiar with everything." His tone was so gentle, and he completely ignored the fact that Maisie was still crying so hard that tears streamed down her face. In my previous life, ever since Phoebe entered our home, Maisie would often collapse and cry for no apparent reason. She would wail, "Mom, it hurts." Watching Maisie suffer from pain and cry herself to exhaustion every day tormented me, and I wished I could take her suffering upon myself. Eventually, I had to quit my job and take her from hospital to hospital. When no medical facility could find anything wrong with her, I started noticing Phoebe's strange behavior. Whenever Phoebe accidentally cut her finger, Maisie would clutch her own and scream. If Phoebe twisted her ankle, Maisie could not walk for days. Then, when Phoebe spilled boiling water on herself, Maisie would immediately roll on the floor in unbearable pain. There were times when Phoebe was not in our sight, yet Maisie would scream in heart-wrenching pain. She would be drenched in cold sweat, desperately reaching out her hands and helplessly begging me for help. Later, I told Brandon about these strange incidents and my suspicions. I even begged him to send Phoebe away, but he became furious. "Maisie's just faking it to compete with Phoebe for attention. She's so selfish, and instead of disciplining her, you're taking her side and making up ridiculous excuses to kick Phoebe out. How cruel can you be to bully an orphan? You're both heartless." With Brandon's protection, Phoebe became even more ruthless. One day, she plunged her hand into a boiling fryer. The next, she pricked herself full of pins. In just 1 month, Maisie had been tortured beyond recognition. I once tried secretly sending Phoebe away. Yet, the next day, Maisie rolled around the house screaming and passed out from pain. Brandon cursed at me daily, blaming my malicious targeting for giving Phoebe severe depression. This continued until Maisie's birthday, when Phoebe jumped from the 5th floor. Just as Maisie was closing her eyes to make a wish, she suddenly opened them wide and died with blood pouring from all her facial orifices. In my extreme grief, I also died from heartbreak. As I was about to take my last breath, I saw Phoebe standing in front of Maisie's cake with minor scrapes, innocently licking the frosting off the knife. My overwhelming hatred had no way to be released. I never expected heaven would give me another chance at life. This time, I was determined to uncover the truth and never let Maisie die unjustly. I stepped between Phoebe and Maisie, burying my guilt deep down as I swung the broom at Maisie. "I'll beat you if you keep faking to get attention." Though it looked harsh, I only gave her a light tap. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched Phoebe closely. If Phoebe got hurt and Maisie suffered, then maybe if Maisie got hurt, Phoebe would feel it instead. Based on my previous life's ending, her goal was to completely replace Maisie. If I could make her believe Maisie posed no threat, perhaps she would stop trying to hurt her. I struck Maisie a few more times before turning to Phoebe with a smile. "Don't take it personally, Phoebe. She's just not used to suddenly having someone new in the house. Go take a look at your room. If there's anything you don't like, just tell me." Chapter 2. Phoebe stared at me calmly, showing not the slightest hint of discomfort. I was puzzled and wondered if I had hit Maisie too lightly for it to have any effect. However, asking me to truly hurt Maisie would be like stabbing myself in the chest. As I wrestled with the thought, Phoebe suddenly dropped to her knees with a heavy thud. Maisie instantly clutched her knees, her forehead slick with cold sweat. "Mrs. Shaw, it's my fault. I took Maisie's room and her parents' love. Please don't hurt Maisie. If you must hit someone, hit me," Phoebe cried, crawling toward me. Her dramatic act caught me completely off guard, and I realized with dread that she was still trying to harm Maisie. I quickly helped her up and gave Maisie a look that said, "Go to your room and think about what you've done." As I led Phoebe to her room, Brandon, who was usually quiet, actually spoke up to comfort her. "Don't mind Maisie. She's too spoiled and needs to be disciplined properly." I quickly stepped forward and pretended to trip, pressing hard on the spot where Maisie had been hit earlier. However, Phoebe remained completely composed with no reaction whatsoever. Brandon pulled me up while saying something, but I could not hear him. My mind was racing, wondering why there was no reaction and what had gone wrong. I suddenly stood up and walked into Maisie's room. Before she could react, I slapped her hard. The cry came from Maisie, not Phoebe. Meanwhile, Phoebe still looked perfectly calm as she hid behind Brandon, her dark eyes staring at me. She mumbled, "Mr. Shaw, I'm scared." Brandon immediately frowned and looked at me coldly. "What's wrong with you? You're scaring Phoebe." I immediately noticed something strange was happening. The pain only transferred when Phoebe got hurt. It was one-sided. I held Maisie tightly, wondering how I could protect her. Maisie placed her tiny hand gently on my shoulder, and only then did I realize I was trembling. Mom, I know you wouldn't hit me for no reason. I'm not in pain anymore, so don't be upset, okay? Tears spilled down my cheeks in heavy drops. Later, I was jolted awake by Maisie's screams. She sat clutching her foot, drenched in sweat, her pajamas soaked through. Brandon woke up furious and yelled, Maisie Shaw, quiet down. Phoebe only took your room, and you've been throwing tantrums every single day? I did not even bother putting on shoes as I rushed to Phoebe's room. Sure enough, I found her standing barefoot on a floor covered with broken glass. Rage shot through me, my voice trembling as I shouted, what the hell are you doing? When she turned to see me, she deliberately fell to her knees among the glass shards, pretending to be frightened while her eyes remained perfectly clear. She said innocently, Mrs. Shaw, I'm sorry, I accidentally broke the glass. The glass pieces were spread evenly across the floor, making it impossible for this to be an accident. From the next room, I could still hear Maisie's agonized wailing, and I wanted to tear Phoebe apart. Yet, I could not. I clenched my fists and gritted my teeth as I carried Phoebe to the bed. Her legs were covered in blood, a horrifying sight to behold. The worst injury was on the sole of her foot, where glass had embedded deeply into the flesh. I steadied my trembling hands and carefully used tweezers to remove each piece of glass. In the other room, Maisie had cried herself to exhaustion and could only manage weak sobs now. Meanwhile, Brandon was still cursing and grumbling. We shouldn't have spoiled you so much. You're making noise the first thing in the morning. How am I supposed to go to work? I felt something touch my forehead as Phoebe used a tissue to wipe the sweat from my brow. I'm so jealous of Maisie. She has parents who love her this much. This is the first time anyone has ever treated my wounds. Mrs. Shaw, don't worry. I don't feel any pain. I smacked her hand away, snapping the cotton swab in two. My voice dropped, sharp and cold. Why don't you feel pain? Phoebe froze for a second, then broke into an innocent, childlike smile. She said sweetly, because I know magic that makes pain disappear. Chapter 3. Maisie cried until she was exhausted and finally drifted into a deep sleep. The sound of me entering the room startled her awake. She immediately jumped up in fright, with a flash of panic in her eyes. She mumbled frantically, Mom, I'm sorry. I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I like Phoebe, but my legs really hurt. Am I sick? Am I going to die? The image of Maisie bleeding from all her facial orifices in my previous life immediately flashed through my mind. I rushed over in terror and held her close. My breath caught as I said in a trembling voice, No, you won't. I will protect you. Since I could not find a solution myself and could not prevent Maisie from being hurt, I decided to confront Phoebe directly and make her tell me the truth. I used the excuse of taking Phoebe shopping for clothes and drove to a secluded area. Before she could speak, I took the offensive and demanded, What are you trying to do? Why are you hurting Maisie? Phoebe continued to act innocent. Mrs. Shaw, what are you saying? I treasure this family. How could I hurt Maisie? I slammed my fist against the seat in fury, glaring at her. You didn't hurt her? Then why is it that every time you're injured, the pain ends up straight on Maisie? She froze for a moment, and I pressed harder. What trick are you using? Tell me how to stop it, or you won't be leaving here. Phoebe suddenly gave me a sweet smile. So you figured it out. Actually, it's just, I focused all my attention on listening carefully. The next second, Phoebe's expression changed completely as tears streamed down her face. I don't know. It really has nothing to do with me. At the same time, a strong force dragged me out of the car. Brandon, who should have been at work, stood there glaring at me furiously. Phoebe immediately cried out to him for help. Mr. Shaw, I never hurt Maisie. Please don't make me leave. Brandon looked at me like I was insane and roared. First, Maisie throws a fit. Now, you're doing the same too? You were the one who said Maisie was lonely and needed a companion. Now that we've brought Phoebe home, you're both acting up. How are we supposed to live like this? I quickly tried to explain. There's definitely something wrong with her. Every time she gets hurt, the pain transfers to Maisie's body. At that moment, Phoebe frantically climbed out of the car and hugged Brandon's leg. Mr. Shaw, I can prove it wasn't me. Please don't send me away. Brandon turned and got in the car. In a corner where he could not see, Phoebe smugly waved her smartwatch at me. Once we got home, Phoebe took a knife from the kitchen, and my heart immediately jumped into my throat. She glanced at the confused Maisie and looked at me timidly. She said, Mrs. Shaw, since you don't trust me, I'll have to prove my innocence this way. Immediately after, she stabbed the knife deep into her thigh. Maisie opened her eyes wide, her mouth gaping open. However, she was in too much pain to make a sound. The shock hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I screamed as I lunged forward. Stop it, stop. Phoebe ignored me completely and kept stabbing herself deeper and deeper. I fought desperately to grab the knife, but I never expected a child could have such incredible strength. Even when I gripped the blade itself, I could not stop her from bringing the knife down. Maisie had already passed out from the pain. Finally, she stopped the knife at her heart and asked with a bloodthirsty smile, Mrs. Shaw, have I proven my innocence now?